So, it's now the beginning of November and we're more than due another Scirocco update. And first of all, I'm just going to talk briefly about my welding equipment. Back in 2008 I bought an Artec INV 160 inverter MIG, and it had given me very good service. Since then, apart from a minor problem that occasionally showed up of the welder tripping out with its warning light lit, which is normally an overheat indication, but this would happen with the welder absolutely stone cold, and it seemed to be related where an arc didn't strike quite cleanly, and or I had a bad earth, for example, and it would trip the welder and I'd have to turn it off and turn it back on again, so it really wasn't too much of a problem. Now, when you start doing welding on very thin sheet metal and you start using the stitch weld technique where you're effectively manually pulsing, it was tripping out a little bit too often, and with my restricted working space I'd often have the welder as far away from where I was welding as possible, and it was getting to be really inconvenient. So I contacted Artec and they said, that is quite an old model, we haven't done it for quite a while, but you can send it up to us and see if we can do something with it, or we'll do you a good deal on a new welder. And you know, they knocked a fair chunk off the list price, threw in a roll of a 5 kilo roll of 0.6 wire, and I had a new welder the next day. And I have to say, I am glad that I did so. This is a big improvement over the old model. Let me just show you what is going to be a repair section for a rear wheel arch, and those of you who follow Fitz's fabrications will recognise the construction technique. And if it will focus, those are my inside welds, and some of them I was seam welding because the performance of this welder at low amps is very smooth, and I'm getting very clean results. Still getting used to it, dialing it in, but yeah, really like this machine. It's smaller than the old unit, even though it's got a higher current rating. It's an all metal feed mechanism. Very pleased. So on to the work I've actually completed. You may remember this inner sill repair panel I made with the jacking reinforcements on the back. So that is now all in, plug welded along here, seamed everywhere else, and all dressed back. I did have some footage of that, but it is the temperatures are now dropping, and this camera will sometimes object to its memory cards if the temperature's low and decide to stop recording. And we have the rear section going in. Excuse me, I'm going to see if that is not a spam phone call. And it was, of course, a spam call, though I do get genuine calls still. So, on to some more areas. Just a small section on this rear wheel arch. Inner arch is good. I've already got a patch made for there. The little fabrication I showed you earlier is the start of repairing this area. Inner wheel arch does require repair on this side, and this area is pretty heavily pitted, and I'm debating whether to go and repair it. I probably should. And moving around to the other side, there's obvious areas that are going to need work. This is the bad wheel arch. It's okay around up to here. This side is just the return. The outer's actually okay, and the inner was, the thickness is reduced but the metal's sound, so I'm still debating how much to do there. Just a little bit of the bottom of the sill, basically the same. Oh. Stop rotating, car. Same repair here as is completed up there, and then onto the front of the sill. Now, there was much less rot on the inner sill this side. You can actually see that the jacking reinforcement is sound, but I've had to cut away this time a section of the outer sill to gain access to these areas in here. This was completely holed through, and once again the jacking reinforcement was quite badly corroded and distorted, so that will be remade. But once this side is back together, that should be it for structural work, and we can move on to the purely cosmetic, of which there is plenty to do, but none of it too serious. I think I've previously showed the screen frame. That was the one actual hole in the screen frame. Other areas are heavily pitted and may get sections cut out depending on just how bad they look when I've got to the base of all that rust. And these areas are fiddly, but not too bad. A lot of this may look like a minor repair, but by the time you've taken the seams back to where there's no rust bulging the seam, you end up with quite a large section. This is going to be a little bit of some awkward shapes in here, but should get to it without too much difficulty. And I've cut a hole in the A pillar in order to gain access to the door check strap bracket, which had broken its spot welds and was doing all sorts of damage to the skin around here. So that'll need tidying up, and the mount welded back in place nice and securely. But overall, reasonably encouraging progress at this stage.